The morning sun cast long shadows through the windows of Riverside Cafe, a high-end restaurant located in downtown Manhattan. Sarah Chen, a 26-year-old waitress, rushed through the entrance at 7:45 a.m., her dark hair hastily tied back in a messy bun. She was 15 minutes late for her shift, something that had never happened before in her 3 years of working at the cafe. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Williams," Sarah called out to her manager, quickly tying her black apron around her waist. "The subway had delays, and my phone died, so I couldn't call." Mrs. Williams, the stern woman in her 50s, merely shook her head. "Just don't let it happen again. We have the morning rush coming in, and Jenny called in sick. You'll need to cover both sections today." Sarah's shoulders slumped slightly. This meant double the tables and double the work, but she couldn't complain. She needed every dollar she could earn. Her younger brother Mike's college tuition was due next week, and she was still short by $2,000. As Sarah began setting up her section, her coworker Tom leaned over. "Rough morning?" he asked, placing clean silverware in his apron pocket. "The roughest," Sarah sighed. "Mike's scholarship didn't come through, and I had to send most of my savings to Mom for her medicine last month. I don't know how I'm going to make this work." The morning proceeded as usual, with business people rushing in and out, demanding their coffee and breakfast with barely a glance at the waiting staff. Sarah moved efficiently between tables, her feet already aching in her worn-out shoes that she couldn't afford to replace. At exactly 9:30 a.m., a man walked in wearing a simple gray hoodie and jeans. He chose a quiet corner booth, pulled out an expensive-looking laptop, and settled in. Sarah noticed that despite his casual clothes, he wore a watch that probably cost more than her yearly salary. Still, she had learned not to judge customers by their appearance. The man was Marcus Thompson, though Sarah had no way of knowing this. At 45 years old, he had built his tech company, Innovat Tech Solutions, from nothing into a $50 billion enterprise. He had a habit of dressing casually and working from different cafes around the city, preferring to observe real life rather than stay isolated in his penthouse office. As Sarah approached his table, she couldn't help but notice how different he was from the usual morning crowd. While others barked orders into phones or typed aggressively on laptops, this man sat quietly, his posture relaxed but confident. "Good morning. Welcome to Riverside Cafe," Sarah greeted him with her standard smile. "Can I get you started with something to drink?" Marcus looked up, offering a gentle smile. "Just a regular coffee, please." "Lack." His voice was soft but carried authority. Sarah nodded and turned to get his coffee, overhearing snippets of conversation from nearby tables about stock markets and corporate takeovers. The morning news playing on the cafe's TV was reporting another local business closure, making her think of her parents' small convenience store that had shut down 5 years ago. When Sarah returned with the coffee, Marcus was on his phone. She placed the cup carefully on the table, trying not to disturb him. As she did, she couldn't help but overhear his conversation. "Yes, proceed with the closure," he was saying. "We'll need to move quickly. The sooner we shut it down, the better." Sarah froze. Something about his tone, so casual while discussing what could mean dozens of lost jobs, reminded her of the corporate executive who had bought out the building where her parents' store was located. The memories of her father's tears and her mother's sleepless nights came flooding back. She watched as Marcus took a sip of his coffee, still talking about closure plans, completely unaware of how his words affected her. To him, it was probably just another business decision. To her, it represented everything wrong with the system she struggled against daily. Little did Sarah know, this ordinary-seeming morning was about to become one of the most significant days of her life. And the man in the simple gray hoodie would play a much bigger role in her future than she could possibly imagine. Sarah stood by Marcus's table, her hands trembling as she continued to listen to his phone conversation. The coffee pot she held felt unusually heavy, and her exhaustion from working double shifts suddenly mixed with rising anger. "The employees won't see it coming," Marcus continued speaking into his phone, his voice calm and measured. "But it's necessary. We'll handle it today." Those words hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. Images flashed through her mind. Her mother crying at their kitchen table, her father's defeated look when they closed their store for the last time, and her brother Mike having to give up his dream college because they couldn't afford it. Without thinking, Sarah placed the coffee pot down on the nearest empty table. Her face felt hot, and her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. 3 years of holding back her feelings about rich people carelessly destroying lives suddenly boiled over. "How can you be so heartless?" she asked, her voice louder than she intended. Marcus looked up from his phone, surprised. "Excuse me?" "I heard you talking about closing something down," Sarah continued, her voice shaking. "Do you even think about the people whose lives you're destroying? The families who won't be able to pay their bills?" Several customers turned to watch the scene unfolding. Mrs. Williams, who was at the counter, started walking toward them with a concerned look on her face. Marcus ended his call and tried to explain. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." But Sarah wasn't listening anymore. 5 years of bottled-up pain and frustration exploded in one moment. "People like you sit in your expensive offices, wearing your expensive watches, making decisions that ruin lives. And you don't even care." Before anyone could react, Sarah's hand moved on its own. The sharp sound of the slap echoed through the suddenly silent cafe. Marcus's face turned to the side from the impact, his cheek reddening quickly. Time seemed to freeze. Sarah's hand stung, and her brain finally caught up with what she had done. The entire cafe was dead silent. Even the usual clinking of cups and plates had stopped. "Oh my God," she whispered, stepping back. I. Sarah C.K.E.N. Mrs. Williams's voice cut through the silence like a knife. "In my office. Now." As Sarah followed her manager, she caught glimpses of shocked faces around the cafe. Tom was standing by the counter, mouth open in disbelief. A couple of regular customers who had always been kind to her looked away when she passed. In Mrs. Williams's small office, Sarah sat in the uncomfortable wooden chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her manager didn't sit down. "What were you thinking?" Mrs. Williams demanded. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" "He was talking about closing down a business," Sarah tried to explain, her voice small. "Just like what happened to my parents." "Sarah," Mrs. Williams interrupted, rubbing her temples. "That man you just slapped is Marcus Thompson." The name didn't register at first. Then Sarah remembered seeing it in the news. Marcus Thompson, the self-made billionaire. The tech genius who started his company in a garage. The philanthropist who had built schools in underprivileged areas. "He's one of the most powerful men in the city," Mrs. Williams continued. "And you just assaulted him in front of 24 witnesses." Sarah felt the room spin. Her job, her brother's tuition, her entire future. Everything seemed to crumble around her in an instant. I didn't know," she whispered. "Pack your things," Mrs. Williams said, her voice tired. "You're fired, effective immediately. You're lucky if he doesn't press charges." Sarah walked to her locker in a daze. As she gathered her belongings, she could hear whispers from the kitchen staff. Someone mentioned that Marcus Thompson was famous for his employee-first policies and had never laid off a single worker in his company's history. The truth began to sink in. She hadn't just lost her job, she had completely misjudged someone and let her past trauma cloud her judgment. As she walked toward the back exit, she caught one last glimpse of Marcus still sitting at his table, calmly speaking to someone on his phone while holding an ice pack to his cheek. What Sarah didn't know was that this moment of terrible judgment would lead to something completely unexpected. Outside Riverside Cafe, Sarah sat on a nearby bench, her small backpack clutched to her chest. The morning sun no longer felt warm. Instead, it seemed to spotlight her shame for the whole world to see. She pulled out her phone with trembling hands and searched for Marcus Thompson. The search results made her stomach sink even further. Headlines praised him as the people's billionaire and America's most employee-friendly CEO. One article showed him standing in front of a new community center he had built in a poor neighborhood, the same neighborhood where Sarah had grown up. "What have I done?" she whispered to herself, fighting back tears. Just then, Tom rushed out of the cafe, still wearing his apron. His face was flushed with excitement. "Sarah, you won't believe what I just heard." Sarah looked up, expecting more bad news. "What is it?" "That phone call you overheard, the one about closing something down." Tom sat beside her, speaking quickly. He wasn't talking about shutting down a business. He was discussing his old tech center in the Bronx. "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, confused. "The building is old and has bad heating. He's closing it down because he built a new, bigger facility just 3 blocks away," Tom explained. All the employees are getting transferred there with a 20% raise. He's even arranging free shuttle buses for workers who live far away. Sarah felt like someone had punched her in the gut. Are you sure? Absolutely. Mrs. Williams just got off the phone with his assistant. Apparently, he's been planning this upgrade for months. The closure was actually a surprise gift to his employees. Sarah buried her face in her hands. Not only had she assaulted an innocent man, but she had also attacked someone who was actually helping people. The irony was almost too much to bear. Inside the cafe, Marcus Thompson was having an interesting conversation with his assistant, Janet, who had rushed over after hearing about the incident. "Sir, should I call the police?" Janet asked, holding an ice pack to his cheek. "This is assault. We can press charges." Marcus shook his head slowly, his eyes thoughtful. "No, Janet. Something tells me there's more to this story. Did you run that background check I asked for?" Janet pulled out her tablet. "Yes, sir. Sarah Chen, age 26. She's been working here for 3 years. Perfect record until today. Her parents lost their convenience store 5 years ago when Megacorp Developments bought their building." She paused, scrolling down. "She works double shifts to help pay for her younger brother's college tuition. She also volunteers at the local homeless shelter every Sunday." Marcus touched his cheek, which was still red from the slap. Instead of anger, his face showed curiosity. "Tell me more about her parents' store." It was called Chen's Corner Store. They ran it for 15 years before the building was sold. They couldn't afford the new rent, which was triple the original amount. "Megacorp Developments," Marcus mused. "Aren't they the ones who've been forcing small businesses out of low-income neighborhoods?" "Yes, sir. They're known for buying buildings and raising rents until small businesses have to leave. Then they bring in large chain stores." Marcus stood up, straightening his hoodie. "Janet, cancel my meetings for the day. And get me everything you can find about Megacorp's recent property acquisitions." "Sir?" Janet looked confused. "What are you planning?" A small smile appeared on Marcus's face. "Maybe this slap was exactly what I needed. We've been looking for someone to lead our new community business protection program. Someone who truly understands what small businesses face." "You can't be serious," Janet said, surprised. "She just assaulted you." "She stood up for what she believed in, even though it cost her everything," Marcus replied. "That's rare these days. Besides, sometimes the best insights come from unexpected places or unexpected slaps." Outside, Sarah was still on the bench, now searching job listings on her phone. Her hands shook as she saw how few positions were available. How would she help Mike with his tuition now? How would she face her parents? Suddenly, a shadow fell across her phone screen. She looked up to see Janet standing there, holding an envelope. "Ms. Chen," Janet said formally, "Mr. Thompson would like you to have this." Sarah took the envelope with trembling hands, expecting a lawsuit notice. Instead, she found a business card with a handwritten note that would change her life forever. Sarah stared at the business card in her hands, her eyes wide with disbelief. The note, written in neat handwriting, read, "Sometimes the biggest mistakes lead to the best opportunities. Come to Innovat Tech Solutions tomorrow at 10 a.m. We need to talk. Marcus Thompson." This must be a joke," Sarah whispered, looking up at Janet. Janet's face remained professional. "Mr. Thompson never jokes about business matters. A car will pick you up at 9:30 a.m. from your address." She handed Sarah another envelope. "This is an advance to help with your brother's tuition payment this month." After Janet left, Sarah opened the second envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a check for $3,000. Tears began rolling down her cheeks as she realized this would cover Mike's tuition and leave enough for their mother's medicine. That evening, Sarah sat at her small kitchen table, staring at her phone. She had been trying to write a text to Mike for the past hour, unsure how to explain everything that had happened. Her brother was in his dorm room, probably worried sick about the upcoming tuition payment. Finally, she typed, "Everything's going to be okay with the tuition. But Mike, I lost my job today. I did something really stupid." Mike's response came quickly. "What happened? Are you okay?" Sarah took a deep breath and called him instead of texting. As she explained the day's events, she could hear her brother's reactions change from shock to disbelief to amazed laughter. "Wait," Mike said, trying to control his laughter. You actually slapped Marcus Thompson, the same Marcus Thompson whose technology I'm studying in my computer science class. It's not funny, Mike. Sarah protested, but she found herself smiling too. The whole situation was so absurd. And now he wants to meet with you, Mike asked, becoming serious. Sarah, this could be huge. His company is known for innovative community projects. Maybe he saw something in you. Or maybe he wants to sue me in person, Sarah replied, her anxiety returning. If he wanted to sue you, his lawyers would have contacted you, not his personal assistant, Mike pointed out. Plus, he gave you money for my tuition. That doesn't sound like someone planning revenge. That night, Sarah could barely sleep. She tried on every professional-looking outfit she owned, finally settling on a simple black skirt and white blouse she had worn to job interviews before. Her mind kept replaying the slap, making her cringe each time. The next morning, exactly at 9:30 a.m., a sleek black car pulled up outside her apartment building. The driver, an elderly man named George, greeted her with a kind smile. First time meeting Mr. Thompson properly? George asked as they drove through the city. Sarah nodded nervously. Don't worry too much, George said, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. I've been driving for him for 10 years. He's not what most people expect from a billionaire. The Innovad Tech Solutions building was a stunning glass tower in downtown Manhattan. As they pulled up to the entrance, Sarah's nervousness reached new heights. The lobby alone was bigger than her entire apartment building. A young security guard approached her. Ms. Chen, please follow me. Instead of going to the executive floors at the top of the building, they went down to the second floor. The security guard led her to a large room filled with maps, charts, and screens displaying various neighborhoods of the city. To Sarah's surprise, Marcus Thompson was already there, dressed in another simple hoodie, this time in blue. He was studying a large map of the city's small businesses, with red dots marking recently closed shops. When he turned to face her, Sarah could still see a faint bruise on his cheek, her face burned with shame. Miss Chen, Marcus said, his voice friendly. Thank you for coming. Mr. Thompson, I'm so sorry about yesterday, Sarah began, her voice trembling. I completely misunderstood, and I acted terribly, and... Marcus held up his hand to stop her. Actually, you might have done me a favor. Sarah blinked in confusion. What? Marcus smiled and gestured to the wall of maps behind him. Let me show you why I really asked you here today. Marcus walked over to the large digital map of Manhattan, where hundreds of red dots blinked across the screen. Each dot represented a small business that had closed in the past year. Do you know what all these red dots have in common? Marcus asked, turning to Sarah. Sarah studied the map closely. They're all in neighborhoods like mine. Working-class areas. Exactly. Marcus nodded. And do you know who bought most of these properties? Megacorp Developments, Sarah replied quietly, remembering her parents' store. Marcus pressed a button, and blue lines appeared on the map, connecting different properties. For the past 6 months, I've been tracking their pattern. They target family businesses in developing neighborhoods, buy the buildings, triple the rent, and force people out. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. That's what they did to my parents. I know, Marcus said softly. Janet showed me their file. Chen's Corner Store. 15 years of serving the community, helping elderly customers carry groceries home, extending credit to families when they were short on money. Tears formed in Sarah's eyes. We had regular customers who came to say goodbye on our last day. Some of them had been shopping there since I was a baby. Marcus walked over to his desk and picked up a tablet. What if I told you that your parents' store wasn't just unlucky? What if there was a deliberate plan to push out small businesses like theirs? He handed Sarah the tablet. On it was an email chain between Megacorp executives. As she read, her eyes widened. They planned it all? Sarah's voice shook with anger. Targeting specific neighborhoods, waiting until business owners couldn't afford lawyers to fight back. Yes, Marcus said grimly. And that's where you come in. Sarah looked up, confused. Me? Marcus gestured around the room. This is our new Community Business Protection Division. We're creating a program to help small businesses fight back against predatory corporations. But we need someone to lead it. Someone who understands what these business owners are going through. Someone with passion. Someone who would slap a billionaire to defend small businesses. Sarah asked, managing a small smile. Marcus chuckled, touching his cheek. Well, your methods were a bit extreme, but your heart was in the right place. You stood up for what you believed in, even though you thought it would cost you everything. He walked over to another screen showing plans for a new building. We're converting an old warehouse into a community business center. Free legal advice, low-interest loans, business training programs, everything small business owners need to survive and thrive. Sarah's mind was spinning. And you want me to? What exactly? To run it, Marcus said simply, you understand these communities. You know their struggles. You have the passion we need. We'll provide the training and resources. You provide the heart. Sarah sat down heavily in a nearby chair. But I have no experience running something like this. I was a waitress yesterday. And I was a college dropout working in my garage before I built this company. Marcus replied, sometimes the best qualifications are life experience and determination. He handed her another tablet showing a contract. The starting salary is $85,000 a year, with full benefits. Plus, we'll cover your brother's remaining college expenses. Sarah's hands trembled as she held the tablet. This amount was more than 3 times what she made as a waitress. Mike could finish college without debt. They could help their parents. Why me? She asked finally. Really? Is it because you feel sorry for me? Marcus shook his head. Yesterday, when you confronted me, you weren't thinking about yourself. You were thinking about all the families who lose their businesses, their dreams. That's exactly the kind of person we need leading this program. He pointed back to the map. Every red dot represents a family like yours. They need someone who will fight for them, preferably without physical violence, though, he added with a smile. Sarah looked at the map, then at the contract, then back at Marcus. What if I fail? What if you succeed? Marcus countered. What if you help hundreds of families keep their dreams alive? Isn't that worth the risk? Sarah took a deep breath, looking at all the red dots on the map. Each one represented someone's parents, someone's dream, someone's life work. Making her decision, she picked up the stylus to sign the contract. But Marcus wasn't quite finished surprising her yet. Just as Sarah was about to sign the contract, Marcus raised his hand to stop her. Before you sign, there's one more thing you need to see. He led her to an elevator, and they went up to the top floor of the building. When the doors opened, Sarah gasped. The entire floor was a giant office space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city. This will be your office, Marcus said, watching her reaction carefully. Sarah walked to the windows, looking down at the city below. From this height, she could see her old neighborhood. Somewhere down, there was the empty storefront that used to be her parents' shop. Mr. Thompson, this is too much, she said, turning back to him. This kind of office should be for executives, not someone who... She paused, still embarrassed about the previous day's events. Not someone who slapped the CEO. Marcus finished with a smile. Sarah, look out there. Every small business owner we help will be fighting their own battle. They need to see that we take them seriously. This office isn't about luxury. It's about showing respect for their struggles. As they walked around the office, Marcus pointed out different areas. Here's where we'll have the legal team. Over there will be financial advisors. That space is for community meetings. Sarah noticed a small room in the corner with comfortable chairs and a coffee machine. What's that area for? Marcus's expression softened. That's the family room. Sometimes business owners will come here feeling defeated, scared about losing everything. They need a comfortable place to tell their stories. Just like my parents needed, Sarah thought, remembering how her mother and father had nowhere to turn when they were losing their store. There's one more surprise, Marcus said, leading her to a door at the end of the office. He opened it to reveal a smaller office with a nameplate on the desk. Sarah's eyes widened as she read it. Sarah Chen, Director of Community Business Protection, Innovat Tech Solutions. I don't understand, Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. Yesterday I was a waitress who assaulted you. Today you're giving me an executive position. Marcus sat down in one of the visitor chairs, gesturing for her to take her seat behind the desk. Let me tell you a story. 20 years ago, I was working as a janitor in a tech company. One day, I overheard the CEO talking about laying off hundreds of workers right before Christmas. Sarah leaned forward, intrigued. I was young and angry, Marcus continued. I confronted him in front of everyone, called him every name I could think of. I was fired on the spot. What happened then? Sarah asked. 2 days later, that same CEO called me. He said anyone who had the courage to stand up to him without thinking about consequences was someone he wanted on his team. He gave me a job in the company's community relations department. Marcus smiled at the memory. That man became my mentor. He taught me that true leadership isn't about power, it's about understanding people. Sarah looked around her office, still trying to process everything. And now you're doing the same for me. With one important difference, Marcus said, touching his cheek with a grin. I never slapped my CEO. They both laughed, breaking the tension in the room. Your first assignment, Marcus said, becoming serious again, is to visit your parents' old store. Megacorp's lease with the current tenant ends next month. I want you to figure out how we can help your parents get their business back and make it better than before. Sarah's heart stopped. You mean? Think of it as a pilot program, Marcus explained. If we can help your parents rebuild their business, we can use that experience to help others. Tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks as she imagined her parents behind their old store counter again, greeting customers with smiles. One more thing, Marcus said, standing up. That contract you were about to sign? Tear it up. Janet will bring you a new one with a better title and salary package. Directors need to be paid properly after all. As Marcus walked to the door, he turned back one last time. Oh, and Sarah? The bruise on my face? It was worth it. Sometimes we all need a wake-up call, even if it comes in the form of a slap. 2 weeks had passed since Sarah's life-changing meeting with Marcus Thompson. Now she stood in front of her parents' old store, keys in hand. The for rent sign in the window brought back painful memories, but today was about making new ones. Her parents, David and Lisa Chen, stood beside her, confusion clear on their faces. Sarah hadn't told them why she'd asked them to come here. Sweetie, why are we here? Her mother asked softly. This place, it still hurts to see it empty. Sarah took a deep breath. Mom, Dad, remember when I told you I lost my waitressing job? Well, I didn't tell you everything that happened that day. She told them the whole story, the slap, the job offer, and finally, her new position. Her parents listened with wide eyes, gasping at certain parts of the story. You slapped Marcus Thompson? Her father asked in disbelief. The Marcus Thompson? The same one who's giving us our store back, Sarah said, finally revealing the surprise as she unlocked the front door. Her parents froze. What did you say? Her mother whispered. Sarah pushed open the door, turning on the lights. The space had been completely renovated. New floors gleamed under bright lights, and modern shelving units lined the walls. A brand new counter with a digital register system stood where the old wooden one used to be. In the corner, a small cafe area had been set up with comfortable chairs. Welcome to the new Chen's Corner store, Sarah said, watching tears form in her parents' eyes. Or should I say, Chen's Community Market and Cafe. Her father walked in slowly, touching the new counter with trembling hands. But how? Innovat Tech Solutions bought the building from Megacorp, Sarah explained. We're turning it into a model for our community business program. Small business owners will come here to see how modern technology can help their stores compete with big chains. She showed them the new features: a digital inventory system, an online ordering app for local deliveries, and a customer loyalty program. In the cafe area, community bulletin boards would help connect neighbors. The rent will be the same as it was 5 years ago, Sarah continued. And the best part? After 5 years, you'll have the option to buy the building at a fixed price. Her mother burst into tears, hugging her husband. Our store, we're getting our store back. Just then, the bell above the door chimed. Marcus Thompson walked in, dressed in his usual casual style. Sarah's parents immediately recognized him from TV. Her father stepped forward, bowing slightly. Mr. Thompson, we can't thank you enough. Marcus raised his hand, smiling. Don't thank me. Thank your daughter. This was all her idea. I just provided the resources. She's the one who designed the whole program. Sarah blushed as her parents looked at her with pride. Though, Marcus added with a grin, touching his cheek, I have to admit, your daughter has a very convincing way of making her point. Everyone laughed, the tension breaking. As Sarah's parents explored their new store, Marcus pulled Sarah aside. The construction team found something when they were renovating, he said, handling her a dusty old notebook. It was behind one of the shelves. Sarah opened it and gasped. It was her mother's old recipe book, lost during the hasty move out 5 years ago. Inside were all the recipes for the Korean snacks her mother used to sell at the counter, the same snacks that had made their store famous in the neighborhood. I think, Marcus said, nodding toward the new cafe area, those recipes might come in handy. Sarah hugged the notebook to her chest, watching her parents excitedly discuss where to put different items. Her father was already making plans for the new inventory system, while her mother was investigating the cafe equipment. They look so happy, she said softly. This is just the beginning, Marcus replied. Next week, we start visiting other small businesses in the neighborhood. Your parents' store will show them what's possible when communities work together. Sarah thought about all the other families like hers, fighting to keep their dreams alive. Thanks to one moment of courage or recklessness, she was now in a position to help them. By the way, Marcus added as he turned to leave, your brother Mike called. He wants to develop an app for small businesses as his senior project. I told him to come see me when he graduates. Sarah smiled. Everything had changed in just 2 weeks, but the biggest changes were yet to come. 1 year later, Sarah stood at the podium in Innovat Tech Solutions' main conference hall. Behind her, a large screen showed the map of Manhattan. But now, instead of red dots showing closed businesses, green dots marked the successful stores they had helped save. The room was packed with small business owners, reporters, and community leaders. In the front row, her parents sat proudly, both wearing aprons from Chen's community market and cafe. Their store had become a symbol of hope for struggling business owners across the city. A year ago, Sarah began her speech. I was a waitress who made the biggest mistake of my life, or what I thought was a mistake at the time. She glanced at Marcus, who sat on stage, grinning and touching his cheek dramatically, making the audience laugh. But that mistake taught me something important. Sometimes the strongest communities are built by people who aren't afraid to stand up for what they believe in, even if they're standing up to a billionaire. The audience chuckled again. Sarah continued, in the past year, our Community Business Protection Program has helped save 157 small businesses. We provided legal support to 312 store owners fighting unfair rent increases. And we've helped 89 businesses modernize their operations to compete in today's market. She clicked a button, and the screen showed photos of various store owners in front of their shops. But these aren't just numbers. Each store represents a family's dream, a community's heart, and a neighborhood's future. In the audience, Mike sat next to his parents, now a fresh graduate. The app he developed for his senior project was being used by hundreds of small businesses for inventory management and online orders. Marcus had already offered him a job in Innovat Tech's development team. Mom and Dad, Sarah said, looking at her parents. Thank you for teaching me that running a small business isn't just about making money. It's about building community. Every day, I see that lesson in action at your store. The screen showed a photo of Chen's community market and cafe. The small cafe area had become a neighborhood gathering spot. Her mother's Korean snacks were so popular that they now supplied them to other local stores. Her father's digital literacy classes helped older store owners learn to use new technology. Mr. Thompson, Sarah turned to Marcus. Thank you for seeing potential in an angry waitress who slapped you. More laughter from the audience. You taught me that true leadership means lifting others up when they're down. Marcus stood and walked to the podium. Sarah has become the heart of our community program, he said. Sometimes the best ideas come from unexpected places or unexpected slaps. He rubbed his cheek again, making everyone laugh. Because of her work, we're expanding the program nationwide next year. Sarah's eyes widened. This was news to her. Marcus continued. Sarah will lead the national expansion as our new Executive Director of Community Development. We plan to help 10,000 small businesses across the country in the next 5 years. The audience burst into applause. Sarah's parents hugged each other, crying happy tears. Mike whistled loudly from his seat. After the ceremony, Sarah found herself back in her office, looking out at the city she loved. The sun was setting, painting the sky in beautiful colors. She could see her parents' store from here, its lights still on, serving late customers. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Janet, Marcus's assistant. "Miss Chen," Janet said, smiling, "there's a young woman here to see you. She was just fired from her job for standing up to her boss about unfair practices. She's scared and angry, reminds me of someone I met a year ago." Sarah smiled, understanding immediately. "Send her in." As she waited, Sarah looked at the framed photo on her desk. It showed her with her parents in front of their store on reopening day. Next to it was Marcus's business card with his handwritten note from that life-changing morning. She touched the frame gently, remembering her mother's words from long ago. "Sometimes the biggest mistakes lead us exactly where we need to be." The door opened, and a nervous young woman walked in. Sarah could see herself from a year ago in the woman's fearful eyes. "Please, sit down," Sarah said warmly. "Tell me your story. And remember, sometimes what feels like the end is really just the beginning."